just a bit outside.
Welcome on into another episode of Nate Hit the Foul Pole. We are doing our monthly off-season edition of the podcast. This is our podcast for December. Be touching on a number of subjects today. My partner here is Zach Goodman. Zach, how are you?
I'm great, Matt. It's been a while since we've done one, but not too much to talk about right now. So we gotta only talk about so much in each episode, but we will be back on a more regular basis come, I guess, February, around then.
Yep. Yeah, we're going to talk, some transactions in the recent couple weeks here. Also have a guest today, an author. We're going to go through our top 5 favorite ballparks that we've been to, and we're going to finish up the show with our favorite all-star moments. So, Zach, if you want to start us off with some recent Orioles transactions.
Yeah, so news and transactions kind of been slow for the Orioles. They're not making any free agent splashes this year. They're not really spending a lot of money. So everything that they do is either waiver claim, Rule 5, or moving a guy throughout the levels of the organization. So it's just been pretty basic so far. But as far as the winter meetings goes, they did make a few Rule 5 picks. The first one they made was Tyler Wells. And Tyler Wells is a 15th rounder in 2016. He's 25 years old. He's 6'8", and he has experience all the way through AA. And he probably would have been in AAA, but he did not pitch in 2020, because of Tommy John surgery. In 2019, he did go 10-6 with a 2.49 ERA, a .955 WHIP, and a 9.1 K per nine. And he has a plus changeup and 2 solid breaking balls. On the second Rule 5 pick they made was Max Stroller, a 5th-round pick in 2017, 25 years old, and a nephew of Ben McDonald, former Orioles #1 overall pick. He has not pitched yet above A+, but he was 5-4 with a 3.69 ERA and 111 WHIP in 2019. He overall is very average stuff, but he does have a 4-pitch mix, and he can carry some value with his fastball and his slider that he can throw for strikes. So they also did make some selections in the minor league portion of the draft. In the minor league portion of the draft, they allow everyone to that is selected to be kept on the team and go immediately into the minor league system. The Orioles selected 3 guys, and I won't go through them completely, but Ricky Ramirez, Ignacio Feliz, and Chris Hudgens. Feliz, an international signing at the DR, $85,000. Ramirez was a 15th rounder in 2017, and Hudgens a 16th rounder in 2017. So 3 guys that immediately enter the Orioles organization and do not have to be sent back. So Matt, what are your thoughts on these guys, and were you excited about any of them?
I do want to first say that, when we did our Rule 5 preview last show, none of these guys were mentioned as potential pickups for the Orioles. But, looking at the numbers, I'm relatively excited about them, especially getting a guy in the system who's 6'8". I mean, you want to have an imposing presence on the mound, but also getting into the Orioles system, I think, is going to help him succeed a little bit. Already being 25 years old, like Wells is, this is kind of the time to shine right now.
Right.
So I think he's going to get every opportunity in the world. I don't expect this Orioles team to be competing for a division title anytime soon. So I think getting him into the system, I think would be beneficial. It just seems to me with a lot of these Rule 5 picks that it's somebody that a scout on the team really likes, or it's something along those lines, because it's really hard to gauge how this team's going to go.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I like what you said about something, a scout liked about them, because I think especially on some of these guys that they're guys that Mike Elias has been, looking at in drafts previous. And like you said, scouts have seen in whatever league they were in. So that usually factors into Rule 5 decisions. And I'm not sure how much Scroller being a nephew of Ben McDonald factors into his decision to be selected. But probably guys that will definitely make a case for themselves in spring training. And I'm personally excited to see what they can do. I think that's probably how Mike Elias and the rest of the staff will kind of determine whether they make the team or not, is spring training and not so much 2019, 2018 numbers.
Yeah, I mean, you want to get as many guys into the system as you can. We've seen a lot of these past trades that they tend to go on the side of quantity, which is totally fine. I mean, you got to have a robust system, and you got to be churning guys out year in and year out every year. And the Orioles seem like they're well down that road.
Yeah, I think talent acquisition is really the number one priority for the Orioles right now. So in the Rule 5 draft, it only costs $100,000 for each selection you make. And it's really not hurting the Orioles, even in these hard financial times where the Orioles are having cut costs, giving out $100,000 to another team to take one of their players and acquire that talent isn't really a big deal. And I think the Orioles probably factor that into their decision. And let's be honest, the Orioles have made selections almost every year since 2005, I believe it is. So it's pretty much expected, and we'll just see if they stick around. But I am also excited about the guys that came over in the minor league portion because you do get to keep them. So we'll see those guys hopefully play maybe Delmarva or Bowie this year, which would be exciting to see for sure.
Yeah, and before we move on to some other transactions, did want another bit of a news here for the Orioles minor league system. They did lose the Frederick Keys as an affiliate, and officially the Aberdeen Ironbirds will be moving into the slot of the High A affiliate.
Yeah, and hopefully we'll see some Adley Rutschman there next year. Mike Elias did say he would start in Bowie, but you never know, I guess. So that'd be kind of cool, considering a lot of Baltimore Orioles fans live in Baltimore and probably are very close to the Aberdeen ballpark. So that should be fun to see. And there will be more quality players that will come through Aberdeen, which I think is always a good thing. And I do also want to make a note that in the Rule 5 draft, the Orioles also lost two guys. They lost Zach Pop, who was acquired in the Manny Machado trade in 2018. And they also lost Gray Fenter, who was a pitcher who had only pitched in Delmarva thus far and had some injury issues, but was a high pick a couple years ago. So two guys that, I'm not sure if they'll stick, but quality talents that the Orioles might have been able to use down the road. So hopefully they'll both be returned to the Orioles. That's all you can hope, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I've been a big fan of both of these guys, actually. Gray Fenter was kind of an overslot guy when he was drafted. Had high hopes for him. And he was progressing in the last couple of years, but he never really could move up the ranks. So he's a guy that you could see possibly being returned. And along with Zach Pop, he's coming off this huge injury, Tommy John. He actually pitched at Kentucky with a guy I went to high school with. So I have that little connection there. But
cool.
I really like Zach Pop. I really like his arm. I think he could be a back end of the bullpen type guy. And, if it doesn't work out, I could see him being returned if he's not ready for the big leagues quite yet.
And Zach Pop was actually traded to the Miami Marlins shortly after the Rule 5 draft. And initially that had me a little bit worried that the Marlins would, give up someone to hold on to him. But I don't think that really is the case. The Orioles in 2018 did not select Drew Jackson and then traded for him from the Phillies, and they sent him back, I think, 6 games into the regular season. So not really too much to worry about, but it's very hard for teams to keep a guy on their roster for 162 games or whatever we have in a 2021 season.
Yeah, I mean, look at the Marlins last year. I don't think they held on to Sterling Sharp, right?
They did not. Yeah, it was very close. It was most of the season, but they let him go.
And that was only 60 games, so.
Exactly. Yeah, that's why I have a little bit of hope that Zach Pop comes back.
Yeah, so exciting stuff. We also had a relatively big-time trade come across with the Angels.
Yeah, so Jose Iglesias was sent to the Angels for Garrett Stallings and John Pinto. So two guys that, are probably more considered, especially on Pinto's side, a lottery ticket, a guy we really don't know much about. He's probably boom or bust. And another international guy, Mike Elias, loves stockpiling the international talent, especially through trades. So John Pinto comes over. And then Garrett Stallings, who is now ranked as the 26th best prospect in the Orioles system, another right-hander that is kind of Zach Lowther-esque, or someone who has a little bit more control. And, it isn't really a super quality arm, but someone who can maybe slot into a 4 or 5 role in a rotation or a long man in the bullpen.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of a shame that, we're losing Iglesias because he was so consistent and he was, a pretty tremendous hitter for when he was on the field last year. But knowing the Orioles, especially in this phase of the rebuild, it is still, money being the name of the game. But I do like the fact that they're getting these lottery tickets. They got 2 of them in the Andrew Cashner deal. So you never know. These guys could actually turn out to be something, and you're getting them for, a relatively cheap player.
Yeah, exactly. And we do have a few other transactions that went through. Connor Green was signed to a minor league contract on December 3rd. So again, not really too much to talk about there, but maybe a guy who could compete for a bullpen spot. Possibly the Orioles are pretty thin there. So, as well as Ashton Goudeau, he was claimed off waivers from the Pittsburgh Pirates a couple days later. Tom Eshelman was outrighted to the Norfolk Tides, and Austin Wynns was also outrighted to the Norfolk Tides. And I think we're going to see some more minor league signings, especially soon. There already been a few that have been reported yet, but I want to wait till they're confirmed to say anything. But minor league signings, you always get, maybe 10, 11 guys. That's what most teams do, and that's what the Orioles have done in the past. So I expect that to happen soon, and maybe next podcast we'll have a little bit more to talk about on that side. But the Orioles have not made any real major league signings yet. So we're just kind of waiting on that. But one minor league signing that was a pretty big deal was Fernando Abad, a guy who's been around for a little bit. He's been in a lot of bullpens over the years, and he's pitched pretty well. Matt, do you like that signing?
I like it. I think you want to have a strong bullpen. I think we saw, last season when at times you don't have a strong bullpen, how it can really negatively affect you. Cole Sulser, especially in that closer role. Some other guys on the team, and losing Michael Givens, losing some other guys too. You want to have that depth, and I think to get through a full season, we're starting to get to the point in the rebuild where the storyline is not okay. We just need to get through the season. We're actually starting to promote prospects. We're trying to eventually, start winning games. Fernando Abad is one of those guys that you can look to and say, okay, we have a 1-run lead, we have a 2-run lead, we have faith in you that you can hold it. So I think it's a good deal.
I think it's kind of a low risk, high reward thing because he hasn't really had much experience in the last few years. He hasn't pitched much at all. He is pitching in the Dominican Republic right now, but he's been out of baseball for a few years. So you never know. I think the Orioles could find a guy kind of like some of the guys they had in the bullpen last year they didn't expect much out of. So, you never know what you can do with a minor league signing. And Tommy Malone was a minor league signing who was sent for a few prospects at the deadline. So you really never know what's going to happen. Fernando Abad could be a very good signing. And he was one of the marquee free agents just a few years ago.
We now welcome our guest, David Ostrowski.
So we now welcome in David Ostrowski. He is a writer, and he just wrote a brand new book called Pro Sports in 1993. David, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Zach. It's my pleasure.
Yeah, you have a lot of great stuff on Camden Yards and the 1993 All-Star Game. So just going to talk about a little, of that and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so graduate of Brandeis. I've lived in the Boston area my entire life. I used to do some sports writing for different publications back in the day. And this is my second book. The first book came out several years ago, Game Over, Game On. But this is first book published with McFarland and Company. And yeah, it's a book that kind of just does a look back on sports in 93. And certainly the All-Star Game that year figures prominently in the year's events, considering that it really showcased, Camden Yards as the first of the retro style ballparks. And obviously it was a trailblazer. And this was the first time, of course, it was really showcased on a national level, this being the All-Star Game.
So tell us a little bit about why you decided to write this book and why you picked the year 1993, because it is a very, very interesting year in sports.
Yeah, sure. So, it's funny. I grew up in Boston. As I said, 9 years old in 93. I was a kid from the 90s. Boston teams were horrible. Or not horrible, but some of them were. Like, certainly the Patriots were pretty bad. The Red Sox and Celtics were pretty mediocre. So in 93, I think some of my fondest memories involving sports did not involve Boston teams. They involved the Cowboys and the Bulls and, certainly the Toronto Blue Jays in baseball. So, I think for me, again, looking back at this year was really the first year where I fell in love with sports. And I also think it just happens to kind of encapsulate a lot of the great dynastic teams of the late 20th century. And then certainly from Camden Yards perspective, I have very, very fond memories of watching that particular game as well as the Home Run Derby. And like I said at the time, it was so revolutionary to see this kind of ballpark.
Yeah, so chapter 2 in your book is all about Camden Yards, and you called it an old-fashioned ballpark with modern amenities. So what led you to write about the ballpark specifically, other than the fact that it was pretty new in 1993, and especially that 1993 All-Star Game?
Yeah, so it's an interesting question. The park, of course, opened in 92. It did not open in 93. 93 was the All Star game. I think when you start thinking about the historical context, right? I mean, this was the first of its kind. And when I say that, I mean, the old school retro throwback where asymmetrical dimensions were the norm. There was brick, there was wood. It wasn't just the concrete donut holes of the 70s and 80s. There at 93, there was still no other ballpark like this, right? It wasn't until the years, ahead, 94, 95, when you started having ballparks in Cleveland and Texas that kind of adopted a lot of these features. And then, of course, the rest is history. There have been over 20 ballparks since then that have adopted the kind of retro style ballpark. And I just think, in comparison to what had been constructed, and when I say that, I mean, typically when you think of these ballparks like Cincinnati, Pittsburgh, even St. Louis in the 70s, they were really dull. They were multi-purpose stadiums, right? Atlanta comes to mind, certainly. Um, and they were built not just for baseball, but for football too, and other events. And this was the first time in a long time that there had been a ballpark built exclusively for baseball.
Yeah, so it's a special ballpark. Almost 30 years later, everyone still considers it as one of the best ballparks in the game. But how did they build it in the 90s to make sure that it would stay so modern after 30 years?
So that's a great question. There was a lot of debate as to whether it was necessary to build it, because of course they had Memorial Stadium, north of town, right? Um, I think the foundation, in terms of how it's been able to, weather, over a quarter century, it's a good question. And I guess the best way I can answer that is just by saying they've kept up by modernizing it. In 2012 and 2013, there were significant renovations. And I was thinking about this other question you asked last night about how it could possibly make how they could possibly make it even more modern or keep up with a lot of the ballparks that have these new bells and whistles. And it's pretty impressive in terms of, I guess, the fan experience. And I think they were really ahead of their time in that regard. When you walk around, especially the promenade and the outfield, left center, there's a lot of area to just walk around and see different, features, right? And I really feel like that is something that many ballparks have adopted since then. So I guess the only area I could really see, and I was there, when I did research for my book a few years ago, but I think the only area that I could think of really that could kind of keep up with the new ballpark in Atlanta, Minnesota, I was there a couple of years ago, is having maybe another restaurant or two. Certainly, there's Dempsey's and there's obviously Boog's Barbecue, but it seems like a lot of these new ballparks have multiple restaurants throughout this. I won't use the word stadium because that's the word that they don't like to use. But I think having more restaurants and even maybe some mixed use retail, I think that might be something that could possibly be added. But again, it's the golden standard. I mean, they were ahead of their time for sure. And it's interesting because the White Sox had a new ballpark built, I want to say in '89, the new Comiskey, and now it's guaranteed rate. And they missed the boat there. I mean, they had a circular, shaped outfield. No, retro style features at all. And, it was built only a few years before Camden. So, and they're kind of stuck with it now because it's not like they're going to get a new ballpark after 35 years, right?
So tell us about the warehouse and the decision to make it the staple of the ballpark.
So that was a very controversial issue for a couple of reasons. One is there was a pretty large contingent of fans and just people in general who did not think it was, a worthwhile. It was a worthwhile concept. They have a warehouse that had been around since the late 1800s. A lot of people thought just knock it down, right? The other people, there was a pretty large contingent of people who thought that it made no sense to have a building there that would block a view of the harbor. They just thought again that would kind of be an eyesore, right?
Got it. Yeah. And why was the All Star game in 1993 so important to the city of Baltimore and the Baltimore Orioles specifically?
Well, I mean, I think if you look at the Orioles in that time, they were in the AL East, right? And the Blue Jays were the dominant team. The Tigers were pretty good. The Orioles, quite frankly, weren't one of the best teams then. This has been a while since they had been in the World Series. I think it was '83, if I'm not mistaken, the last time. Obviously, they still had, one of the most popular players in the game in Ripken, but they were not a team that was. This was before the, Gehrig Staricki broke. They were not a team that was in the postseason all the time. So this was a chance for them to, have um, a national showcase. And I think it's also pretty typical for new ballparks, their second year of existence, to have an event like this. Certainly that was the case in Texas, where they didn't like it opened in '94, but they didn't really. They hosted the All Star game in '95. So again, I think the first year was to kind of work out some kinks, and the second years when MLB scheduled, the All Star game.
Yeah, I think that certainly played a factor. And they got that All-Star game in 1993, but they haven't had another one since,
Yep.
almost 27 years later. Is there any chance the Orioles could be getting another one soon? And what do you think MLB is waiting for? Are they waiting for Peter Angelos to sell the team or the Orioles to be good again?
That's a great question. I think they're going to definitely get one soon. If I had to guess, at some point this decade. I think if you just think about it, it's like all the new ballparks. Like I know Atlanta's getting it this year. God willing, with COVID, who knows? But all the new ballparks, like Minnesota has gotten it recently. Certainly Pittsburgh and Cincinnati. And in Arizona, of course, that's not necessarily that new. Miami. So I think it's like those ballparks had to go first, right? And then you know the Dodgers haven't had it in a while, so they're going to get a chance. And even Fenway, which had it in '99, there's some talk that they might get it. But I mean, truthfully, Baltimore hasn't had it in a long time, so I would have to imagine they will get it very soon. Because again, 27 years, there's only so many teams in baseball.
Right, no, for sure. And you talked about it before a little bit, but a lot of parks over the years have taken a lot of inspiration from Camden Yards, and I think there will be a lot in the future. But what are some of the stadiums that you think have done the best in taking that inspiration from Camden Yards?
Well, I think one I was at several years ago was in San Diego, Petco Field, and I think two reasons stick out. One, it's right in smack down in the middle of the city, right? It's in a great area downtown San Diego, just like Camden Yards is basically for Baltimore. So having that real inner city feel, I think is wonderful, and that's not the only park that has adopted that feature. Many have since then. And secondly, I think it's the kind of the fake warehouse they have in San Diego. I love that. When I was there, it's obviously not as massive as the one in Baltimore, but that's a feature that they took directly from Camden Yards, and I just think the way they recreated it with the old Navy sign is very cool.
Yeah, I totally agree. We were just going to talk about that in one of our segments later in the show. But talking about warehouses, Ken Griffey Jr. hit that in 1993 in the Home Run Derby. You talk about that in a lot of detail in your book, but no one has ever hit it in actual game
Right.
action. Is there a player you believe could ever hit the warehouse, and who would it be?
It's a good question. If it were in left field, you would have think there would have been multiple balls hit because perhaps like a McGuire or Sosa in interleague games, would have done it. But in terms of a lefty, if Bryce Harper, maybe that one, he comes to mind. Again, Stanton and Judge are righties, so no chance. It's so hard because of the aerodynamics there, right? Like they've had, I want to say, close to 100 balls flop down on Utah Street. So maybe you figure, I don't know, 3 or 4 a year. But he's the only one who's actually hit the base of the wall, just because there's a wind tunnel there, and it really would take a shot close to 500 feet to hit the wall square. So I don't know. It's a good question. Obviously, that's quite a prodigious shot, and like I said, it just so happens that in the American League over the past quarter century, the left, the prominent sluggers have been right-handed. Or
Yeah,
baseball.
I saw Bryce Harper a few years ago hit the batter's eye, the very top of the batter's eye in batting practice. So I certainly think he would be a good pick of a guy to hit one that far because it is a very long way. But I'm sure will happen someday. I thought Chris Davis might be able to do it.
Yeah, Chris Davis. Yeah.
Our lefty bat was there for so long, but he hasn't done it yet. But you mentioned in your book that slave quarters actually existed nearly 2 centuries ago, where the first base hits now. Could you expand a little bit on that? Because I think that's very, very interesting, especially in the history of Baltimore.
Yeah, and I think it's important to look at in '93. This was a year after the Rodney King incident. The riots in LA. So race relations was it was a very I mean just like it is now a very hot topic, right? And obviously Baltimore's got a vibrant African American community, so there was a pretty big emphasis during the game on that. Morgan State University, they had a wonderful choir, did a rendition of the national anthem. As I mentioned, there was a whole tribute to the Negro League All Stars that week. And yeah, I mean, the fact of the matter is that, around where first base is, was where there were slave quarters set up along Pratt Street to Fells Point was a route that, tragically, slave traders did business in. That is just an area of the Baltimore that, is a sign of its horrific past, and it just so happens to coincide with the geographic location of the ballpark. So, again, I think it was a fitting homage to, the city's past, and I think the ball club did a great job recognizing it that week for sure.
Yeah, I read that part of your book, and I immediately thought of Babe Ruth's father having the
Yep.
saloon in center field. That was something I had known about for a little bit, and then I actually read that in your book a few paragraphs later. So, did this factor into the decision of where Camden Yards would go? Because this is a pretty incredible part of not only baseball history, but of Baltimore history as well.
Yeah, that was really fascinating. So in very shallow center field, um, is the actual site of where George Ruth Sr. did own a bar. His son, when he was getting married, he did live there for just a little bit. And certainly when he was a youngster, he was kind of running around there. But it was a very, very popular establishment. Well before Babe Ruth was Babe Ruth. I mean, when he was just a little tyke. And yeah, I mean, it's just, again, it's so interesting that this ballpark, it was kind of coincidentally built there. And it was when they renovated, well, not when they renovated, when they broke ground in the late 80s and early 90s, the Babe's daughter, they kind of consulted with on some of the artifacts that were around there, and they dug up, and there were bottles and utensils, and just actual artifacts from that site. But I just think it's so interesting, and not only that, but the Babe Ruth Museum is like a fly ball from the ballpark.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great place to go for sure.
Absolutely,
And
it
you
really.
mentioned in your book. Oh, I'm sorry, did I cut you off?
No, no, no. I was just gonna say I can't speak highly enough of that museum. It's a really
Oh
thoughtful
yeah,
place to check out.
very neat, and it's great that it's right by the ballpark for sure. So you mentioned in your book that there are a few artifacts inside the warehouse and a lot of stuff that isn't available to the public eye. Is there anything you know about that's inside there that would be pretty cool to talk about?
Well, I can tell you that there's a lot in that warehouse. I mean, I think obviously, there's a great souvenir store. There's Dempsey's. The team's offices are there, so you have the whole administrative office is on one floor. I want to say it's the third or fourth floor. The TV studios are there. So in terms of artifacts, I've got to be 100% honest. I don't recall exactly. I do know that the process of cleansing that warehouse was pretty arduous. It took months and months of power washing, and there were some pretty nasty things in there for sure. Because, like I said, it had been neglected for decades. Um, I mean, it really hadn't been in use from around the time of the Spanish American War until the end of the Cold War. It had been close to a century where because trains had just stopped going to Camden Station.
Yeah, it's incredible to see some of the pictures from the early 1900s for, with the tracks running down Utah Street. And it's
Yeah.
very historic. As a wrap up, we can't talk about the 1993 All Star Game without talking about Cal Ripken. He appeared in the All Star Game in his hometown. Obviously, what kind of importance did that bring to Cal Ripken himself and then the Orioles as well?
So I'm really glad you asked about this because it's kind of an interesting piece of trivia. Ripken was hitting, I want to say 202 for the first half of the year in 93. So clearly, the fans voted him, and I think it would have been interesting if the All Star game weren't in Baltimore because I don't know if he would have, even if it was Ripken, he was having such a terrible season that I don't know if they would have voted him in. I mean, I don't. This was before Jeter and Nomar and Vizquel and A-Rod, but who are the shortstops there were. But the point is, he was clearly the hometown choice, and he had to be, starting, even though he was like most All Stars aren't hitting 202. um, so yeah, I mean, obviously, he was still in the prime of his career. I mean, he was headed towards the back nine. But he's still Ripken, and yeah, he got probably the loudest ovation. And he did play. He started, which was more than Mike Mussina could say. Mike Mussina went to warm up in the ninth inning, and this was kind of a story that many Baltimoreans will remember. He never got in the game. There were boos raining down on Cito Gaston for having his guy Dwayne Ward, the closer, come into the ninth and pitch the entire ninth inning while all Mussina was doing was warming up in the bullpen and never got in. So, it was obviously for them, considering they were kind of a middle of the pack team that year, it was obviously great to have a representative, considering the fact that Toronto had 7 All-Stars, and of course they were a rival of Baltimore's during that time.
Yeah, for sure. And David, thank you so much for coming on the show. It was
My
great to
pleasure.
have you. And would you like to plug anything? Of course, your new book.
Yeah, if anyone needs some good holiday/quarantine reading, feel free to check out Pro Sports in 1993. It's on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, wherever you can get your ebooks. So, Zach, Matt, thank you so much for having me. This has been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much, David.
All right,
All
be
right,
well.
All right, moving on to our next segment. Zach and I are going to talk a little bit about our favorite stadiums that we've been to, and we're going to rank them 5 to 1. And I will start off with my number 5, which is Petco Park in San Diego. The Padres play. I really like Petco Park. I think it's just kind of shrouded in the whole feel of San Diego, kind of just the easygoing type feel, always sunny. And the factory type building they got in left field really reminds me, in a sense, of the warehouse at Camden Yards in terms of this is like a distinctive part of the ballpark. Other than just being a really nice new park, I think that's really something that I like to see, kind of a signature feature. So that's why it's at my number 5.
Yeah, I would love to go to Petco. I haven't been there, unfortunately, but it's definitely on my bucket list of places to go because it is very nice. I mean, you can see through the pictures and the games that are played there, and the warehouse in left field is a pretty cool staple as well. So I definitely like to make it there, but I have not yet. I've only been to 6 parks, so this list is kind of a little bit less difficult for me. But at number 5, I have Yankee Stadium. Not a ballpark I like too much. I got to be honest. It's at number 5 for a reason. Not only because the Yankees play there, I mean, that's part of it, but the other part is they ran out of hot dogs when I was there. The food was terrible. So Yankee Stadium, I did really enjoy the ambiance there. I thought the atmosphere was pretty cool because of all the history and, everything that's happened there for, such a long time now and right next door with the old Yankee Stadium. So I did enjoy that part of it, but I did not enjoy the food situation. But I would go back. It's not like a place I wouldn't go, but I really wouldn't recommend it to anyone.
I mean, it's a pretty good segue. I have not actually been to Yankee Stadium. I've been to 13 stadiums, but Yankee Stadium's probably the closest stadium vicinity-wise that I haven't been to. That and Citi Field in Flushing, Queens. My number 4 is another division rival. It's going to be Fenway Park. Really, really enjoy how closely seated everyone is in Fenway Park. Like if you ever see film of old games and the black and white, you see Brooklyn Dodgers, those type of stadiums, Ebbets Field, Fenway Park. It was built in that era. It was built in the 19 teens, and it really gives you that feel of the old park. And I try to make a habit of every stadium that I go to, I take a stadium tour. So part of the stadium tour was actually going up into the Green Monster seating area and kind of overlooking the cityscape of Boston, but also the field in front of you. Really, really cool. Really enjoyed it, and it makes my list at number 4.
Yeah, Fenway Park, another one I have not been to, but maybe one I should be, going to at some point. So historic, and some of the greats of all time have played there. Pretty much everyone who is anybody in baseball for the past 100 years has played there. So very, very cool stuff, and definitely on my bucket list as well. But my number 4 is going to be Chase Field in Arizona. I think this is one of the ballparks with the best food in the entire Major League Baseball. The food there is absolutely incredible, and I really, really like the area around it. I think Phoenix is a great city, and it's just right in the middle of the city, which I think is pretty nice. It's air conditioned inside. It's there's a roof that they can open and close. I just think it's a great stadium, and I really did enjoy the one game I saw there. So it's not quite at the top of my list, but I definitely like it a lot.
I too have been to Chase Field, and I will say it would have been an honorable mention, probably right outside my top 5. Have you tried the churro dog when you were at Chase Field?
I did have the churro dog.
Yes, I did as well.
Incredible.
It's delicious. I also love how those West Coast or those stadiums have like the Panda Express. They have like you get Chinese food or Asian cuisine there. I like that as well.
Yep.
So also a good pick there. My number 3 happens to be my favorite of the newer ballparks. And by newer, I'm just going by like last 10 years or so. And that would be SunTrust Park. When I went, it is now referred to as Truist Park, and that would be in Cobb County, where the Atlanta Braves play. Just an absolute awesome place to go to because it's not just a stadium; it's really like a sports complex. Like attached to the stadium are all these bars, these restaurants, a little park area to play in for kids. It is just a complete awesome experience. And if you're just looking for the experience overall, for the amenities, that is the place to go. Truist Park in Cobb County.
Yeah, I have not been to Truist Park either. I think that would probably easily crack my top 5 if I did go there because I've heard a lot of great things. A lot of people that I know have been there. And like you said, very modern. There's a lot of restaurants, amenities around there. So I would like to go there at some point. And the Atlanta Braves are such a good team right now. They'd be fun to see for sure. But my
I
number
actually
3
went there. I don't know if you remember, it was 2 years ago when Manny Machado hit the go-ahead home run in extra
incredible
innings. I was
game.
at that game. Yep.
Yeah, that game took, I believe it was like 13 innings, something like that.
Oh yeah.
Incredible
Way
game.
more fun when you're intoxicated.
For sure, for sure. So number 3, I have T-Mobile Park in Seattle with the Seattle Mariners. It was called Safeco when I went a few years ago, but I thought that was an incredible ballpark. Again, just very, very great atmosphere there. A lot of very happy Seattle Mariners fans at that time. They were doing pretty well. They were winning. So I really enjoyed that. And the stadium overall is just very beautiful. I mean, it's got a massive scoreboard that is easily one of the best in baseball. It overlooks the skyline of the city. So I was a huge fan of that. And like I said, the atmosphere there was what I think does it for me. And I didn't eat too much food there, so I can't say much on that, but I really did enjoy T-Mobile Park.
Yeah, I have not been. I have not been to Pacific Northwest, but I would love to go there. I've heard really good things about that stadium, and especially about the stadium where the Seahawks play as well. So yeah, looking forward to get out there sometime.
Yeah, I'd love to be out in the Seattle Seahawks stadium for the 12th man. I think that's just incredible. Whenever we get fans
Be
back,
awesome.
that's definitely on my bucket list because that's apparently incredible.
Yep. Yeah, good pick there. My number 2 seems to be a theme for me. On my list, I either like the super new or the super old. So my number 2 is going to be Wrigley Field in Chicago, where the Cubs play. This was constructed, I believe, right around the same time, if not the same year as Fenway Park, um, back in the 19 teens. And what I loved about it when I went, especially, and this is probably like 2007, 2008. I remember Jay Payton was playing for the Orioles, so it was way back in the day. But they did not have the electronic scoreboard yet. And what I loved about that is you had really, really, really had to pay attention to the game. And I think more often than not, especially now in the age of smartphones, that people don't necessarily pay attention to every pitch, every inning. And especially without an electronic scoreboard, you had to keep track of the outs, the people on base, who was up to bat. Um, so I think that was really my favorite part. And Wrigleyville, the surrounding area, is just a fantastic area for baseball.
Matt, when you go on trips to other stadiums around the country, do you always see the Orioles play?
Yes, I mean that's the idea. That's kind of a common theme. Not every single time, but I'd probably say like 75 to 80% of the time.
I have not seen the Orioles play outside of Camden Yards. So, maybe something we'll do next year. They're in
Yeah.
a lot of, close stadiums with the Yankee Stadium and everything. So definitely
Yep.
try to see that soon. But
Mhm.
my number 2, and a lot of people are going to hate me for this, but Camden Yards is my number 2 because it's not as good as my number 1. And, it's a great stadium, but we talked about it a little bit as far as modern features goes, and I think that's where it lacks. I would love to see a new scoreboard. The scoreboard is terrible for as nice as the rest of the stadium is. The food's incredible. The service is incredible. The baseball team, not incredible. But it's
How dare you?
overall an incredible atmosphere, and that's easily my number 2. And it comes down to what the defining feature is of my number one. So I won't talk about that yet. But Camden Yards is incredible. Just needs a little bit of updating for sure.
I also realized that I just snubbed PNC Park, which I love.
Oh
in,
yeah,
in,
yeah,
Pitt,
yeah,
in
yeah.
Pittsburgh, and a lot of people say that it reminds a lot of people of Camden Yards. And thinking back on it, maybe I would reshuffle my list and have it in my top five. But I kind of consider PNC to be like a minor league version of Camden Yards. So my number one, kind of giving it away, is Camden Yards. Definitely showing my bias here, but it just feels like home. Like when I think of Camden Yards, I feel like home. I don't feel that way about M&T Bank Stadium. I think it's just because I go to so many games at Camden Yards that I just feel like I know every inch of that ballpark. Obviously, like you mentioned, all the great things about it, the warehouse being so signature, Boog's Barbecue. I just feel like I can go there any day of the week and have an enjoyable experience. And it's really funny because we're so spoiled being Orioles fans that you first go to Camden Yards and you're like, oh, this is what every ballpark is like. And then you go to
Right.
other parks and you're like, oh, Camden Yards is the best. Now I
Now
haven't been
that
I
is
haven't
very
been to San Francisco, so I can't speak on that. And I realize that ballpark is continuously mentioned as being the best in major leagues. But for
buddy. You're
me,
giving away my number one here.
I know. But for me, Camden Yards, nothing tops that.
Number one, Matt just said it, but Oracle Park in San Francisco, literally incredible. I went there for the first time, I believe it was 2017, and the bay out behind the stadium is just incredible. I mean, you go there, and that's the first thing you notice. The park itself is beautiful, but you look out toward the bay. Whenever you have a view of the water behind a stadium, I just think that's really second to none. And the food was incredible there. It was on a really, it gets very cold there, which is kind of an interesting feature that a lot of the other stadiums don't have. So I thought that was pretty cool. And just the overall, again, the fan experience was just incredible. And I haven't gotten a chance to go back. I've only been once, but that was truly the most incredible ballpark. And I think it blows every other ballpark out of the water. A lot of people are going to hate me for saying that because, Camden Yards is so beloved. But like you said, we can't take Camden Yards for granted for sure. It's great, and we're lucky to have it in Baltimore.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I can be the guy to say, Zach, that's a terrible take. Like, how could you go against Camden Yards? But I have not been.
Terrible thing. It might be.
I have not been, so I can't really poo-poo your take there.
That should be number one on your bucket list. I'm just gonna say right now.
So I have been to San Francisco, but I've not been to a game because the Orioles were not playing, and that's my one and only rule, as you know.
I believe I saw the Phillies in San Fran, but I could be wrong on that.
Okay. Yeah. I've been to 13. So I do like some of the Midwest ones. Especially Chicago. Cleveland's kind of unique, Progressive Field, whatever it's called now. Used to be called Jacobs Field. But yeah, I mean, definitely my least favorite is definitely the Trop in Tampa for sure, not even close.
Have you been to Marlins Park?
I've not been to Marlins Park, nope. But
I'm going to throw a curveball at you here to finish out the segment, Matt. But who is the greatest player you've ever seen play live?
I would say Ken Griffey Jr. I saw him when he was on the Cincinnati Reds, playing the Indians, and this would have been about 13, 14 years ago. I know that I saw CC Sabathia's last start as an Indian, so whenever that was, and they were playing Ken Griffey, and that would be my choice. What about you?
I don't know. It's between a few. I mean, I think Mike Trout is the obvious answer here. Mike Trout, I've seen him probably like 3 or 4 times now, and he's just incredible. I've never even seen him get a hit. I mean, he's been 0 for 4 in every single game I went to.
Really?
But he's just fun to watch. I mean, in the outfield, he's incredible. I remember when I went to Yankee Stadium, it was against the Angels, and he was just commanding the outfield. He just goes everywhere. I mean, he calls off other outfielders. He makes dives. I mean, he's truly, spectacular out there. But I haven't seen him get a hit yet, so hopefully soon. But I think Miguel Cabrera will be another one. Clayton Kershaw. There'd be a lot of guys that I think would be, between, but I think Mike Trout would probably be number one. And I might have seen Griffey at some point, but I don't remember. And so maybe I have. But Alex Rodriguez, another one I've seen live, I think I would put up there in the greatest ever. So I think it's an interesting question.
I would also hedge and say in his prime, I think Ichiro was incredible to watch. Like,
Have you seen Ichiro live?
oh yeah, early days like 2005, 2004, whatever it was, with the Mariners to watch that, and it seemed like he was like always getting hits against the Orioles too. So, dislike him for that reason, but he was very much a sight to behold.
Yeah, I don't remember it, but I probably have seen Ichiro at some point. And same with things I don't remember. Vlad Guerrero Jr. Vlad Guerrero in 2010 with the Orioles in his final season, 2010 or 2011, I believe. And I probably saw him, but I don't really remember. I know I've gone to games pretty much every year since then, so probably then. But yeah, it's interesting to see who we've seen. It's too bad, we didn't grow up in the 70s and 80s and get to see some of the, superstars that played back then, like Hank Aaron. But,
I will get to say the first game that I remember, I was 7 years old. It was Cal Ripken's last season, and I got to see him live in one of his very last games that he played in baseball.
I've never seen Cal Ripken live because he retired a little bit after I was born, like, a couple months. So it's unfortunate.
Yep. That's all right. I mean, I don't remember very much, so don't have much to tell you there. But if I had to pick a list, I would say those three.
Also, I mean, I can't go in this segment without saying I've seen Pablo Sandoval because he is the greatest baseball player of all. And same with Chris Davis, another great baseball player I've seen. So,
I thought you were going to say Pablo Sanchez for a second.
No, I've not seen Pablo Sanchez. He's not technically real, so haven't seen him.
The man, the myth, the legend. Okay. Due to the guest that we had on talking a little bit about the 1993 All-Star Game, we figured we would finish up the show with some of our favorite All-Star Game moments. So I will list off a few and get your takes here, Zach. I think my signature and maybe favorite All-Star moment didn't actually happen during the All-Star Game, and that would be in 2008, or might have been 2009, when they christened Yankee Stadium. And in the home run derby there, Josh Hamilton absolutely going off and just putting on a show.
It was 2008 because I actually have a ball from that home run derby that Josh Hamilton hit.
Wow. Really?
So, I do, and it's actually signed by him too. I got it at spring training a few years ago in Arizona. Yeah.
That's pretty cool. I would say that's rare, but he hit so many home runs that it's probably not.
I'm gonna look up the number he hit real quick, and then we'll put it in.
But I mean, then again, some of the most rare like baseball cards have like a print of like 100 or less. So you're probably in that select group.
How many did he hit? I can't figure it out.
A lot.
Let's see. He hit a lot.
Amount. I'm gonna guess. If I had to guess, I would say 59. That would be my guess.
28.
28?
Oh, first round. That was first round.
Okay. I was gonna say.
No, my bad. Let me see. Total.
Because I know he didn't win the home run derby that year.
He didn't win it? Okay.
Justin Morneau won it, I'm pretty sure, because he beat him in the final round because he was so tired. But
home runs Josh Hamilton hit.
While Zach is looking that up, I'll list off a couple more of my favorite moments. And 1993 All-Star Game, definitely include in there the Randy Johnson, John Crockett bat, which may or may not be the most overmatched at bat in Major League history. Go back and watch some of that film. It's pretty fun to look at.
So Josh Hamilton hit a total of 35 home runs in 2008.
Wow.
Yeah.
So the first round 28 and then just completely fell off after that.
Correct. Yeah, only 4 in round 2. So not great. And then in the finals he hit 3 against Justin Morneau and lost.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, I mean, it was the first round was a show, and I think that's one of the most electric stadiums and crowds I've ever seen. So that was fun.
Yeah, Justin Morneau has to be one of those guys who was so big for a while, and nobody knows where he is now. Like, he's not been in baseball for quite a few years, and he just kind of fell off too. And such a great player in his day.
Yeah, I mean, there's tons of players like that, and maybe they just want to, be a little bit more reclusive. They've kind of been in the limelight for half their life at least. So I don't blame them.
Yeah, no, me either.
Okay, another All-Star moment. Not something I watched. I was alive for it, but I did not watch it. the 1999 All-Star game, which featured Pedro Martinez absolutely dealing. I believe he struck out the first 6 hitters in that game, which was like a murderer's row, especially in the steroid era of players. And also wheeling out Ted Williams there at the All-Star game at Fenway is pretty special.
Yeah, I mean, that's incredible moment in its own. And then Pedro Martinez, his career was just incredible. So to have him add another part, to his resume, that's an awesome moment for sure.
Yep. And then I'll go here. I'm gonna save the best for last. 2002 All-Star game, when Torrey Hunter robbed Barry Bonds right there at the wall. Obviously Barry Bonds' his career, it was definitely not over at that point. It was kind of peaking, but to me, it kind of felt like a ushering in the new type feel with Torrey Hunter kind of being really young at that point, and you kind of get that vibe now with some of the players we got coming up. So.
Yeah, Torrey Hunter, I mean, a guy who was always really known for his defense over his offense. He was a great offensive player, but his defense was, one of the best in his day, and he's just a fantastic center fielder and almost reminded me a little bit of Adam Jones a lot when I watched him play, just kind of the same center field prowess.
Yeah, and then my absolute favorite All-Star memory, I believe this was the first All-Star game that I watched, was that 2001 game in Safeco, and we all remember how Cal Ripken kind of got pushed out of position there to accommodate Derek Jeter and Alex Rodriguez. Kind of funny there, moment before the game, and then obviously hits the home run to kind of cap off his career there. Really, really special moment.
Yeah, I'm shocked that you didn't list one of the moments that I really actually enjoyed myself, and that was Derek Jeter's final All-Star game in 2014.
Meh.
I know a lot of people hate Derek Jeter, and I don't think he's that incredible, but that was a good moment. I specifically remember being on summer vacation and watching that moment unfold, and it was kind of a historic moment. I hadn't seen too many like that before. I hadn't seen Cal Ripken's at all because too young for that, but just to see a legend in his last All-Star game is pretty neat. So I thought that moment may deserve an honorable mention.
Yeah, I think it certainly does. When I was going through my list, I looked at it as a potential topic to list here, but I guess my judgment got a little bit clouded by them like honoring the new retiree every year, so it didn't really feel special to me. Um, Looking back, maybe at the time it did, but looking back, I guess it got clouded a little bit. But definitely a great moment in All-Star game history.
Yeah, I think Cal Ripken's 2001 All-Star game, we talked about it a lot, was before was another one that you could probably list up there. That's a fantastic one.
All right. Anything else to wrap up this show, Zach? I know we had a jam-packed episode today.
Yeah, for sure. No, went over an hour on this one, and it's going to be hopefully a more exciting off season in the next few weeks. We'll get some Orioles news, hopefully, but I don't have too much more.
As always, if you want to follow us on Twitter, you can do so at Foul Pole Pod. We're also on YouTube. If you just look up Nate Hit the Foul Pole, we have all of our episodes on there, whether we do them video or not. We're going to talk a little bit more in our January episode about scheduling and how that's going to work for the upcoming season. But thank you so much for listening, and we will talk to you soon.